Okay, welcome everyone. This is the final session of our Utility Solutions Conference. The title of the session is Benefits and Pitfalls of Virtual Instructor-Led Training Beyond COVID-19. We're joined today by a five-member group of individuals who have really forged some new trails over the last year and a half and have some pretty interesting insights to share with us on this topic. With us this morning is Steve Griffin with EGW, Wade Balmer with Industrial Training Services, Warren Miller with Warren Miller Enterprises, Keith Kittinger with Centerpoint Energy, and Kenny Reynolds with Piedmont Natural Gas. We'd really like to thank all of you guys for taking your time to share some of the insights that you guys have with us. Before I get way down the road, just a reminder, I wanted to mention that these sessions are being recorded and that we will be making these videos available in the next few days through our YouTube channel. As everyone by now is probably aware, there has been a door prize given away in each session of the Utility Solutions Conference. This session actually is a little bit different because the winner of the grand prize of $500 will be revealed at the end of this session. I'll be doing that. We'll talk a little bit more about that here in a bit, though. Good luck to everybody on winning the $500 prize. Here in just a minute, we'll get to meet the panelists for the session. But as I've been doing, I want to go over some of the ground rules just one last time. Microsoft Teams live events. This format is a lot like watching a live stream on social media. You're viewing us, but we cannot hear or see you. You can, however, interact with us, and we really invite interaction in this session in particular. Again, there's a little chat icon on the top of your screen with a question mark bubble in the middle of it. If you click that, it'll open a Q&A chat box, and you'll be able to submit questions. As questions come up throughout the session, we would encourage you to submit those using the function, that functionality that it gives you. And then I'll collect those questions and comments as they're submitted, and I'll relay them to the presenters during that portion of the session. Just as a note and a reminder, the presentation as it's in progress, you won't be interrupting us at all with any sort of questions or whatever that you send through there. So feel free to submit those as they arise, and I'll collect them and present them, like I said, at the end. Along with questions, and let me just kind of reiterate on this point, we would also love to hear some of your comments based on experiences that you've had this last year or so with regard to virtual training. Comments like that would be very appreciated. We have a lot of knowledge on this panel, but you know, there's never too much knowledge. So just let us know how everything worked, what did work, what didn't work, and we would appreciate your input. Those comments, if you would, just share those via the same question and answer function. That pretty much does it for the ground rules. Now I will introduce our very special panel of training experts. First off, we have Steve Griffin. Steve is the Vice President of Service Delivery for EGW Utilities, Inc. Steve has over 20 years of serving in a variety of management and supervisory capacities for the operations of a multi-state LDC and transmission company. His current responsibilities are the management and oversight of EGW services departments, each providing EGW customer solutions for their repair, compliance training, and field services needs. Additionally, Steve spent many years serving in the United States Army, retiring at the rank of Command Sergeant Major. As a graduate of the United States Army Sergeants Major Academy, his experience and leadership skills translate well for the training and operational needs of EGW's customers. Steve and his wife, Lori, live in Van Buren, Arkansas. Next up, we have Keith Kittinger. Keith is the Regional Operations Director for Centerpoint Energy, Arkansas and Oklahoma, with over 33 years of experience in natural gas distribution operations and engineering. In his current role, he provides oversight for the safe and efficient operation of all gas distribution facilities to ensure compliance with company policies and governmental regulations. Keith has earned a Bachelor of Sciences in the natural gas engineering from Texas A&M University, now Texas A&M Kingsville. That's in Kingsville, Texas, and he is a registered professional engineer. Keith and his wife have 3 daughters and live in Maumelle, Arkansas. Warren Miller is up next. Warren established Warren Miller Enterprises in 2016 to provide regulatory assistance and consultation services to pipeline operators, contractors, and companies in areas of operator qualification, operations and maintenance, drug and alcohol, control room management, and integrity management. He is a charter member of the OQ Integrity Coalition, which developed an improved program for distribution gas operators and contractors released in 2020. Warren has a long and diverse career with PHMSA, that's the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration of the DOT, which he facilitated the federal and state committee for ensuring a consistent inspection process during the rollout of the original OQ rule. Additionally, he co-developed the inspection protocols, forms, training, and guidance for the OQ regulations and represented PHMSA as a charter member on the ASME B31Q qualification of pipeline personnel technical committee. Early in his career, Warren consulted in the oil and gas industry from Texas to Wyoming. While assisting operators with many regulatory requirements, he later joined RSPA, which is the Research and Special Programs Office of Pipeline Safety, in Denver in September of 1991 as a petroleum engineer. Next, we have Wade Balmer. Wade is currently the Vice President of Operations at ITS. He works to create and implement practical processes that help strengthen departments and cross-functional collaboration. Wade believes increasing the quality of internal collaboration will lead to delivering better products and services for our clients to help them ensure their workforce is qualified. Wade previously led evaluator operations and the Train the Trainer compliance program at ITS, working directly with ITS authorized protocols and evaluators to ensure operator qualifications given through ITS programs are accurate, effective, efficient, and consistent. He has helped build and strengthen partnerships with industry-leading national training providers who offer OQ services using ITS programs. During his tenure at ITS, Mr. Balmer has worked in sales and business development and has served as the voice of the ITS e-learning courses since 2006. Wade is credentialed as a master trainer through Levine Learning Services and attended both Murray High School and Murray State University. And finally, we have Kenny Reynolds. He has been in the training and instructional design field for over 20 years. He has experience in the retail industry and in public utilities. His current position in the natural gas business unit of Duke Energy in Charlotte, North Carolina, involves the design of learning solutions to support a variety of internal clients. He is currently focused on a leadership development curriculum for management that incorporates both computer-based training and the instructor-led courses. He has an extensive background in design and photography and uses these skills to create engaging learning. He earned his certified ROI professional credentials from the ROI Institute of 2014. For the last 2 years, he has been product owner for the NGBU VR project known as Virtual Crew. He has been instrumental in the development of 5 VR training simulations that allow technicians to practice potentially dangerous tasks in the safety of a virtual environment. In addition to VR simulation for patrolling pipeline, he has successfully used for performance evaluation that same technology when qualifying technicians for this task and industry first. Whew, that was a mouthful. So at this point, I want to go ahead without further ado and send this over to Mr. Steve Griffin, give him the con, and he can take it from here. Steve?
Yeah, thank you, and good morning, everybody. Appreciate you joining us here. That's quite an intro. Aside from my bios, that's pretty impressive that the bios of this panelist. So thanks for those introductions, Mike, and thank you to all the panelists for being here today to share with our audience your thoughts and your organization's experiences on this topic. You know, it's a real pleasure and honor for me to be a part of this session. It's not often that I get to pick the brains of a group of individuals that represent such an amazing cross-section of our industry. I might add that also this panel, just looking at your bios, has added up, it's well over a century of combined experience serving the natural gas industry. That's a lot of valuable knowledge that we can learn from. So thank you again for being here today to share that with us. So a quick overview of this session. My job today is going to be to set the scene on this topic and to provide opportunities for our panelists to share their experiences and insights. I want to remind everyone, like Mike mentioned, to please type in any questions you may have for the panelists. These will be addressed at the end of the session. So just rolling it off here, let's take a little trip on a time machine back to March 2020. If y'all recall back approximately 14 months or so ago, get a historic perspective of what we've been through. I'm just going to kind of set that scene. The COVID-19 pandemic is knocking on our doorsteps. There's considerations are having to be made in response to new challenges, restrictions that we're encountering, solutions are needing to be found and implemented in a fairly short order. However, customers' needs for natural gas never slowed. Workers in all of the sectors of the gas industry are still needed, and historically, many of these functions were performed in a face-to-face type of venue. So if you want to really talk about an essential worker, just look at all the jobs that were needed to deliver gas from the wellhead to the burner tip. The demand for customer heating, cooking, manufacturing processes, etc., those all continued. So as that scenario unfolded, the industry as a whole was looking for solutions. You know, how to keep your workforce safe, how to keep the customers safe was the paramount driving factor. Efforts were being made to minimize or eliminate face-to-face interactions between worker and worker, worker and customer, worker and vendor, etc. While providing services, still we required to have and maintain a trained and qualified workforce. That didn't go away, didn't pause. It was still a requirement. And then, of course, if you remember back, basically March was kind of the real cradle of this event. It progressed rapidly. The pandemic required the industry stakeholders to respond fairly quickly to it. And, you know, it brings to mind, I believe it was Plato that penned the saying, necessity is the mother of invention. Well, we certainly were encountering a lot of necessity back in March and those following months that came up too, that was driving this train. So these challenges brought to the forefront really important solutions and tools, which rapidly evolved and played a big part in the responses by the industry. And one of these was a development and implementation of virtual, or what some people call remote formats for meetings, trainings, classes, instructions, for a lot of different activities. You know, it was a big part of the industry's gas operations that moved into this digital format in a very short period of time. I've spoke with others in the industry and learned that the industry's preparedness varied greatly. You know, the use of the virtual format, their ability to implement and use that was all across the spectrum of readiness. Some had already been looking at it, and some, you know, this was just a totally new concept. Some even had it implemented and was already moving forward with it prior to the pandemic coming up. So the use of the virtual format was often considered by these individuals and by these organizations as a future method to augment our current and historic ways of delivering training or having company interactions like meetings. So now, due to the circumstances created by the pandemic, businesses in general were being driven to adapt now, and I can't emphasize that enough. Really, the timeline for this activity was so shortened up. People were looking for solutions very quickly. It was significantly accelerated. So virtual capabilities helped us to provide additional tools and flexibility. It also helped us to gain efficiencies for stretching already strained budgets too. So I think there's some lessons to be learned here. Hopefully the panelists will be able to share these, that there's more than just solving the pandemic issue. I think we're seeing some budgetary things that came along and came out of this as well that were a benefit. So this type of solution requires technology, and that technology would need to be acquired and trained on. You know, we started learning things like definitions of Teams and Zoom and other communications formats together with We need video capabilities within organizations, cell phones, tablets, connectivity, cellular, Wi-Fi. All of these things had to be considered and vetted. And of course, workforce education. So you can't just roll out all these tools and all this technology and not educate the workforce out on how to use it. So that's kind of where we were and have seen events over the last 14 months. Let's kind of fast forward now to present day. I've done enough talking. Here we are roughly 14 months later. And I really want to ask what transpired with our panelists during that time since the beginning of the pandemic event. So I'd like to start with asking the panelists to please share your organization's experiences or your personal responses as you face the challenges of operating in a pandemic environment. So if we could kick it off and start with Keith from Centerpoint, could you start this off?
Yeah, thank you, Steve.
You bet.
You know, as you mentioned earlier, safety for our employees and our customers was paramount. We learned how resourceful that we can be to acquire PPE. Everybody was competing with everyone else on trying to get things. For mask, I think one of the initial thoughts about where we were about getting masks was one Saturday morning, we all went out and hit every Tractor Supply within our footprint to buy every bandana that was available. And that was just a Saturday morning blitz. And it was, you know, that was kind of the onset to everything that we were starting. Prior to that, if you hadn't used Amazon, you're probably an expert now. And I'm sure we funded a lot of that for disposable masks, for Tyvek suits, for booties. For hand sanitizer, we purchased everything available from, including from distilleries, from half pints to 55-gallon drums.
Wow.
Here's an example of one of our half pints from our local distilleries. You know, we confirmed how resilient and flexible our employees are. I feel like our employees knew what we were doing, and we were trying to keep them safe. While budgets are always important, we were doing what we had to do, what we felt we needed to do, especially to keep the doors open and keep our systems operating safely. Throughout this time, I maintained contact with our pipeline safety folks and make them aware of what we were doing. Our employees continue to work safely with the additional protocols. And again, that was a lot of the things that we had to do additionally. We started asking the questions from the customer service groups on what their current COVID positions were. Then we had to also, you know, if we ever had to enter a home, we had to suit up completely, and we'd also have somebody go with them to help them dispose of the PPE that they were using. But the thing is, you know, as many of us transitioned to working from home, we all remain productive. And I think even when folks had to work from home with their kids, we still found a way to remain productive. We definitely tested the Wi-Fi at home too, with all the additional devices. Going forward, I think we've learned how we need to remain a mobile workforce, not only for field employees, but for the back office folks. At the time of the pandemic, we were in the early stages of deploying smartphones. So we were, you know, somewhat behind on the curve with that kind of technology in the field, especially in the field. But we did find a way to deploy all of our smartphones in Arkansas and Oklahoma. And then other than becoming very proficient with WebEx, and several of us still trying to become proficient with Teams, we were really unable to utilize a whole lot of virtual training for our folks. you know, we ended up having to make classes smaller to be able to maintain the social distancing. We didn't get all the folks in. For several weeks in the beginning, we did cancel a lot of the training, but then we did open it up to local folks that did not have to travel. And again, where we could provide the social distancing. Ultimately, it was several months later in May that we did finally open it up for out of town folks to come in and train. Again, it was the issues with staying in a hotel and those types of things. But other than that, I'm pleased with how we've responded to it as a company and as an industry.
That's great. Thanks, Keith. So the cell phones, they're kind of a lifesaver, huh? With the smartphones, being able to contact your folks out in the field and bring them into meetings via the cell phone.
Now yes, they still had the flip phones out there for the most part, and so we've learned a whole lot with that. But with that said, we've not gained all of we haven't got all the efficiencies out of that yet.
Right.
Still working on it.
Well, thank you. Next, I'd like to ask Wade. Wade, your perspective from an OQ format provider. How did those last 14 months impact ITS?
Thank you, Steve, and thank you. It's really an honor to be on a panel with this much knowledge, and I appreciate it. Thank you. Yes, we have learned a lot at ITS. As most of you know, we are a training company, but we are also a technology company. And we develop apps, we develop tools for evaluators and proctors to do their jobs, but not only do their jobs, but do their jobs easier. Well, those things were being used prior to the pandemic, but this posed a new problem because our perspective at ITS is we credential evaluators and proctors to effectively do their jobs to ensure a qualified workforce. Before the pandemic era, we had always conducted those classes face-to-face. It was a situation where our teams would travel. In 2019, I was on the road continually. Working with operators and contractors across the country, working with evaluators, training them, and doing that face-to-face. Well, when February, March hit, and we were unable to train proctors and evaluators face-to-face, we had to come up with a solution. As you mentioned, Steve, we started throwing out terms like Teams meetings, Zoom meetings, go-to meetings. There are a variety of platforms that we felt we could use to effectively train and credential proctors and evaluators. Now, keep in mind, we're not operator qualifying individuals to perform those covered tasks in the field. So we developed a new program. And the phone started ringing. What are we going to do with evaluations? What are we going to do with proctoring and so on? And we knew that evaluators and proctors needed to continue to be trained. People still had to be qualified as these essential workers. We developed virtual training. It was very effective. At first, it was a little raw. We had to learn as we went. We chose several different platforms of those that were mentioned and landed on one that we felt worked best for groups of people. When you start working virtually or remotely, you get several people in the room, and all of a sudden you have some that maybe can't use their camera, or some that their microphones may not work. But in this endeavor, we realized that a certain platform was a little more effective for us and what we were trying to do. So we landed on that, and we continued to develop our virtual program. And we're still using it today. It's been very successful. It's been effective. So we've been very, very pleased with the outcome. Going forward, I think ITS we've learned so much, and we've learned that having this technology and the ability to do this can help us grow in other ways and doing other things as we move forward with our organization. So we've learned an awful lot.
Thank you, Wade. You know, if you would have asked me in 2019, or as an evaluator.
Okay.
Yeah.
You left us for just a second. You're back now.
Okay. If you would have asked me in 2019 that I was going to be able to, in the future, to have my proctors within my organization or my evaluators be able to get qualified remotely, I would have thought you were telling me big stories. I've been doing this for many years, and I've always budgeted for and planned for sending people, to get those kind of credentialing done. So absolutely, that's an important step in the right direction, I think, that you guys undertook there. Thank you, Wade. And I'd like to ask Kenny. So Kenny, I think, brings a really interesting perspective from Piedmont and from Duke Energy. I think they were involved in this type of process of virtual training prior to COVID ever getting launched. Is that right, Kenny?
Yes, Steve, thank you. We were actually beginning to explore virtual reality as a way of providing training, as it turned out, to also do performance evaluation for one of our tasks. But again, let me back up just a little bit, because I think what we've heard from the other panelists so far is kind of the same thing we went through as a company. We had just begun providing sort of new hire training classes in person at a new facility we had in Charlotte, North Carolina. And we had one of those cohorts come in just prior to the beginning of the pandemic, and it was quite successful. We were able to train multiple field customer service and O&M technicians as a group, and then they broke into smaller specialty groups to learn tools and so forth. When the pandemic came, that disappeared. And what was challenging for us is that we had to find a way to continue that training, but also we had to teach our trainers how to deliver that training. And I got to tell you, that was a challenge. I mean, you've got a group of trainers. We have a group of trainers that, they're experienced delivering instructor-led training. That's what they do. That's what they've done for 20 years, right? So now you're asking them to learn how to use WebEx, and we did use that initially. I'm telling you, it's like teaching Greek. It really is difficult, and it's intimidating, really, for so many of us that were not used to the virtual delivery. So that was one of the things, and I think one thing that was effective for us is we really took the approach of, okay, let's make sure we train our trainers before we have another new hire training cohort. Let's make sure they're comfortable with it. Let's let them practice, go through it real time, provide feedback, give them an opportunity to learn how to deliver in that format. We've since transitioned from WebEx over to Teams, and that's been effective for us. That's really the platform that I think we use more than anything now. But along the way, we were also developing virtual reality as a training supplement. And even though that's virtual, you still have to have someone there with that technician in order to help them get into the headset, walk them through getting comfortable with it, and provide feedback as that experience is cast to a monitor. So there were lots of things going on, but like everybody has said, we kind of met the challenges. We developed protocols that allowed us to continue to train, and we facilitated using really a virtual delivery method.
Well, that's great. Appreciate that, Kenny. Thank you. And finally, I'd like to ask Warren. Warren, a big part of how the industry operates is the regulatory bodies, PHMSA, state commissions, et cetera. Can you provide us some insight into what has been the reaction from these regulatory agencies, during this time?
I can, Steve.
There you go.
One of the things that the pandemic caught the regulators up just as short as everybody else. One of the things that they had to deal with was the fact that typically most of their inspections had always been face to face. Now they couldn't even, see anybody. They couldn't do inspections on site, and so they couldn't even go to their own offices. So many of them had to come up again with a process to say, okay, how do we continue doing our job as required by law to make sure the operators are meeting those requirements. So after a while, and it did take them a few months to decide to do, and of course they had to look at the different formats to come up with their remote inspections. A lot of them started out as phone calls, but I think they did finally go to one of the virtual systems. Number of the operators that I talked to were saying they're wanting our records in these different formats, and we don't have them that way. And as a ex-PHMSA inspector, we were required to accept a record as the operator had it, whether it was electronic, by paper, whatever format. But they were trying to change electronic formats, and I'm going, going to have to figure out a different way to answer those questions that the inspectors want. So it was quite the challenge. Visiting, that I don't believe that any of them had even additional considerations about the training that operators would be having to be performing, continuing to do the job. I don't think that that's been something that was of their concern at that time. I think now with the publicity of this virtual development and the training and things that folks are talking about, I think that it will be of a consideration for them looking forward to see how operators are performing. I think that, and there was some stays of enforcement on certain activities that were going on. Of course, some of those just came off the last couple of days. I think that since the mask requirements have backed off, that I think that the inspectors will probably be showing up more and more on site. And of course, the feds were stayed away. I don't know, some of the states may have tried to get in there a little bit sooner, but eventually they'll be back. But looking at the virtual training will probably be something that they'll probably scrutinize now.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting topic on how the oversight agencies will perceive these new methods. The operators are required to continue to explore new technologies as they evolve in the industry, whether that be leak detection or locating technologies or whatever the case may be. And to me, this just fits right into that same category. This is just another advancement or evolution in the industry that we as a whole will need to be, examining and how we're going to implement that and move forward with it to benefit us and our customers that use the gas. So appreciate that, Warren. I that's really good insight. So now I'd kind of like to move forward in our time machine just a little bit. We talked about, the impacts there over the last 14, 15, 16 months. And I'd like to get kind of a future perspective from this panel. I'd like to know, what does the future hold for what we have learned and the capabilities that we've gained? Some of the panelists may have some thoughts on how they're going to implement some of the strategies around using these additional tools maybe that they have brought on as a result of the pandemic. So just to reset the scene, we're in kind of a post-pandemic time now. As we come out of this crisis and we move forward, how do we leverage what we've learned and those capabilities? And if we can, I'd like to start again with Keith, if you can.
Thanks, Steve. I'll tell you, one of the things that we got to experience during the pandemic was moving one of our offices, and we moved from a downtown area out into West Little Rock, and so we were going through a remodel in a different facility at this time. And based on the pandemic, we made changes because of that. We had to had to change up how our cubicles were designed and put a glass up top, you know, to give the folks a little more protection. And then we had to move them all between the, you know, during the pandemic. So all that was staggered. So that was really fun. And but we also are in the process of building a new training facility. We started back in November, and we've got a 50,000 square foot building on 10 acres that, you know, the plan is to have the leak field and the things that we've always, you know, we've always had that desire, at least at Centerpoint in our region. And that's starting to come to fruition. But again, with the mindset of what does the pandemic look like? What do the classrooms look like now or need to look like? We're beginning to implement some of those things, and certainly the virtual technology will be there. And as we move forward, we're always looking for those opportunities to be more efficient in our training, to be able to touch more folks out there. And so again, a lot of those specific things we're trying to incorporate into our new training facility.
That's good insight. Keith, was Centerpoint, did it practice remote work previous to the pandemic?
Oh, not previous to, no. Well, I say that for very few folks.
We were the same way at EGW. That's something that really pushed us forward and became, you know, well, during the pandemic, it was primarily remote workforce. However, we still had a workforce back in the warehouse that had to be there, shipping, receiving, things like that. But it's pushed us now to become a hybrid model. As we're coming out of that, we've seen a lot of gains that we can have and benefits to our workforce to be a hybrid model that utilizes, you know, both the method of people in the office and people working remotely. So thank you for that. How about you, Wade, and ITS? Going forward, what can ITS be expecting to do? I think you're on mute. Somebody's muted everybody. Mike?
Can you hear me?
Yep. Gotcha.
Okay. Thank you. We've learned so much, Steve. Everything from employees working remotely and how effective that can be, to offering new and enhanced products to our operator clients. As I mentioned, we've always done our trainings. It's been a train the trainer, and it's been done face to face. Well, this gave us an opportunity to really think about that. We're redesigning our train the trainer program. We're going to have more options for operators to have the ability, if they can't come on site or we can't go on site, that we will have that option to remotely or virtually train evaluators and proctors. It's given us the opportunity to research and develop new products and apps, different things that can be used in a crisis like this. So many areas of growth. Although it was a horrible thing, I think that the upside to it is really what can be accomplished when you're put in a situation like that. So it's just been a really neat experience in that we are bettering what we're able to offer our clients. We're redesigning some programs and gonna go forward with more options. You know, during the pandemic, we realized we were able, and to date, we have managed to credential over 1,000 new evaluators. And if we can accomplish that during a pandemic, just think what we can do under normal circumstances.
Really? Have any of your clients approached you about various tasks in their OQ libraries, being able to deliver those from a remote perspective, either the training piece or the qualification piece?
Yes, we get calls on that quite often and questions around that. It's important to remember that with our from what we do in the industry as a third party provider, we support the operators. So we want to be available and have the technology and the knowledge to support an operator if they want to go in that direction. And that's exactly what we're doing. We are partnering up with some very well-known companies with some very well-known technologies, and we are extremely excited about that because, again, that's going to be an opportunity that maybe wouldn't have happened as quickly, not that it wouldn't have happened, but as quickly as it is now. So we're really excited about those opportunities, again, to support the operators who have elected to go that direction with training and even the operator qualification of their workforce.
Right, right. Yeah, thank you for that. That's really good input there. We at EGW have experienced much of the same coming from the customers, but not so much on the OQ forefront as it is on like manufacturer training of a particular product or certification of a particular product, being able to deliver that remotely. I mean, we had to evolve and learn all those aspects that we normally would do within 3 feet of somebody, how to do that from 1,000 miles away. So, and do it effectively to where you feel confident that that person has the same level or a better level of training and qualification. So it's an evolution for us too. So Kenny, I'd like to ask you too, as we move forward and coming out of this pandemic, if you could provide some insight as to what Piedmont or Duke is considering going forward. I know you've got this virtual training software and process going on. It's very fascinating. I think I saw that at the ITS conference before the pandemic started. I got a little taste of that.
Right. Yeah. So thank you, Steve. We had, to your point, we had already begun developing virtual reality as a training supplement. And really during the pandemic, we realized that we could allow people to practice a dangerous task instead of being in a hands-on situation. They could be in a virtual reality experience that doesn't require the closeness with the trainer and the technician. They can maintain social distancing. The trainer can actually watch as the person performs a task. They cast that VR experience to a monitor or a tablet, so they can watch from a distance. In the future, they could even watch from another location, from long distance. So we know that it reduces travel, it reduces the time it takes to set up for and perform a task. And so virtual reality really gives us value back. And again, we started with it as a training supplement, but one of the things that happened early on is one of our most experienced performance evaluators, qualification performance evaluators, said, you know what, patrolling right-of-way would be the perfect VR solution. So, we went down that road, and in fact, we have developed a great virtual reality simulation that allows a technician to qualify or to perform in front of an evaluator. That they see more AOCs than they would see on a normal right-of-way. Every time someone goes into it, it's randomized. They may see 6 to 8, different AOCs. And one of the interesting comments from one of the technicians was, I saw more AOCs today than I've seen in my career. And so it's a robust way to test a person's ability to recognize and react to and identify the proper response to those AOCs. So we feel like there's great potential for what we call virtual crew, and in fact are now partnering with ITS to offer that to other natural gas distribution companies.
All right. Having a military background, the government's been using that virtual training in that very sense for quite a while now. Now, it used to be pretty rudimentary back 15, 20 years ago, but it has evolved and gotten much better to where they can place the individual in the environment that they want them exposure to safely, right? So you told me something earlier in an earlier meeting about efficiencies gained too that I found really interesting. About how you can put somebody through the training quicker. Is that? Wait 1 second. He's still muted. There you go.
As part of our development process, we had to demonstrate that there was value. In order to be funded to develop this, we had to demonstrate some value. So one of the things we did time studies of setting up for performing an actual task, doing it hands-on. What does that take in time? Everything from getting ready for it, putting on PPE, performing the task, and then cleaning up for the trainer to clean up afterwards. And really, it looks like, based on our time studies, that we save about 50% of the time if we can do it in VR. Because remember, you can do it anywhere. You can do it in any weather. You're inside. You don't have to don heavy PPE. And, for example, purging, you have to wear fire retardant PPE. It's not necessary in VR. So, but you have to select it in VR. You have to indicate that you know what PPE is necessary. So, yeah, we have definitely saved time, and that translates into money.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate that. And finally, I was wondering if, Warren, do you have any thoughts that you'd like to close with on kind of what the regulatory's perception may be with using virtual delivery in the future? And not just so much for training, but there's a lot of discussion going on about qualifying people, either virtual or at a distance. You got any thoughts on that?
I do, Steve. Matter of fact, I visited with you folks yesterday just to get concurrence from what I believed I had remembered and would know about. Certainly, I think the states will probably follow whatever PHMSA would agree upon as far as doing evaluations virtually. The regulation does not say anything against it, but an operator that is qualifying their personnel, they may have to make sure that the individual, has those knowledge, skills, and ability, and can say, yes, I know that they can do this. If in talking, really believe that there's a couple of different things to consider. One, what's the complexity of the task? Certainly there are going to be tasks that you could not do virtually. Certainly anything with the fusion, welding, probably reg stations, anything that is very critical. Like Kenny's already talked about, they're talking about patrolling, placing line markers, things like that. Those would be those tasks that would be, right off the bat, something that I could say, yeah, I don't see any problem there. Another consideration would be, is this initial qualification or is this a subsequent? If this is initial and you've got new people that have never done it before, operator may say, we're going to do hands-on evaluations here. But, if somebody's been doing this and this is their third time being reevaluated, that might be a place to use this virtual as a reevaluation tool. So again, the operator has to look at it, measure it out, review it, and say, this goes back to the terminology. It was actually when the B31Q was being put together about the red face test, being able to say, yeah, this makes sense that we can do it this way. So, I'd say, take a look at your covered task list. These are ones that we cannot do. And then everything else, what are the possibilities that we can develop here? And that's how I would see that the regulators would want that same type of comparison and critique when you're doing this. But the states would probably follow what PHMSA would accept, except there are some states that would be very critical probably of it before, if they don't see something from the federal side.
I fully agree. There are differing levels of acceptance on some of these methods. So you mentioned that there's no regulation that says that, it's against virtual training, but certainly if an operator in their OQ plan have written in there how they're delivering it, then that's a consideration, or their O&M, as long as your plan doesn't specify that it's delivered a certain way, provide you some flexibility in how it's being delivered, right?
Well, the training is one way, but you do have to state your evaluation methods in your OQ plan. So that would have to be something that's specific.
Perfect. Well, thank you. Appreciate that.
Thanks, Steve.
Yeah, well, so that kind of wraps up to the end of this discussion. Mike, if none of the panelists, if you have anything else to close off here, I think we're going to roll into the Q&A piece of this.
Okay, give me a second. Give me a second here. Let me get the next slide up. And the first question that we have. Okay. The first question that we've got is, can you talk about the possible economic effect to implementing this virtual training going forward?
Okay. One of the things that we, as I mentioned earlier, we can reduce the amount of time it takes for a person to perform a task hands-on or to practice performing that task hands-on. And when I say that, remember that's for the technician as well as the trainer. So that time, if we save, let's say 30 minutes while performing, let's say purging with inert gas, practicing that task, if we save 30 minutes for the technician, we're also saving 30 minutes for the trainer. We can also save travel costs because we can take a headset, or we can have a headset in any of our resource centers, and technicians can come there rather than coming to a specialized training facility. So they can practice these tasks, and it's of course beneficial for them to have the ability to practice and develop that muscle memory in advance of subsequent requalification for OQ.
Would anybody else like to contribute to that question? Okay. Question number 2. With regard to OQ training tasks, has ITS or other OQ platforms considered which specific OQ task better aligns with the remote virtual training format?
Wade, is there specific tasks that are better aligned? Obviously, Warren made a good point about how fusion and welding and those critical tasks like that. Are there other tasks? And I think Kenny also mentioned right-of-way monitoring too, that have kind of risen to the top. Is this a potential for tasks to look at for virtual?
Right. ITS has not gone to that depth yet of identifying which tasks could be used as a virtual reality type training or qualification. But again, that is something that we would leave up to an operator. An operator could make that decision, outline it in their operator qualification plan, and then of course ITS would support that with that specific covered task list. So we're very open to what operators deem those tasks to be.
Okay.
I'd like to weigh in also, Mike. I think with the training, anything could be virtual. I mean, the operator has to do training for emergency plans. I mean, there's a number of different areas to utilize this, not just OQ, and would recommend that. I think that making sure that there's a differentiation between the virtual training and the virtual evaluations, that's where you want to call that list on those covered tasks.
That's a really good point, Warren. I've seen virtual safety training like fire extinguisher training. Have y'all been involved in that? So it doesn't have to just be OQ, it's across the board, right?
Right.
Anybody else like to weigh in?
Yeah, I would. I was just going to mention a mock drill. I mean, that's we've done some of that in a virtual type environment, but moving forward, that's another one of those efficiencies that I think you can gain from a mock drill type scenario.
Mock drill, just elaborate a little bit, like a line break or some sort of other emergency overpressurization maybe, or something like that?
Correct. How do you respond in an event of a tornado hitting a particular area,
Yeah.
or a major line feed that breaks, and then you create the scenario after that. But you could have all your folks in one room or in multiple areas participating with that.
Yeah, could I add one thing? Can you hear me? I think
Yes.
one of the considerations is, you think about patrolling right of way, and again, if you go out and patrol a real right of way, you may or may not see any AOCs. I mean, it's hit or miss, or at the same time you're exposing yourself potentially to insects or being chased by an animal or falling in a hole or whatever. So it's potentially dangerous. And it doesn't necessarily test your ability as well as it could. So I think one of the considerations is look at a task, and let's say leak investigation, for example. If you go into a neighborhood and you do that virtually and you have the ability to scan that neighborhood with an RMLD to identify if there's the presence of gas, and if you note that, get closer to it, take a reading with a CGI virtually and identify how severe that leak is. And the value of VR is that could be set up to be random every time you do it, rather than trying to set it up in a yard and walk and set up for someone to have to find that leak. You could really test them much more effectively in VR for something like that.
That's absolutely right. Kenny, one of the things you mentioned earlier that I think is a really powerful piece to support the use of this is the AOC piece. I mean, historically, those have been talking pieces, tell me about AOCs, tell me about your response to these AOCs, but placing an AOC in somebody's training I think it has a huge value to it.
Yeah, I mean, that's really true. I mean, on our performance evaluation checklist, I mean, typically the person has to identify the appropriate AOCs that might be encountered when performing that task. I mean, they have to verbalize it, right? But in virtual reality, they see them, and then they are prompted to number one, to identify what type of AOC it is, and then to explain to the evaluator why they selected that AOC. So it's a more robust test, I think, of their ability to perform. And this is, of course, after having taken the knowledge test. They still have to do that before they perform.
Right. Thank you.
Hey, Kenny, with regard to VR, our industry has a lot of technicians that have been performing gas operations for a long time. What has the acceptance and or feedback of these more experienced technicians been with the use of these virtual reality technologies?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we survey our technicians after they've been in VR. We do it electronically as part of the process, and what we found was that probably over 95% of the technicians that have tried VR in our company have had no experience with virtual reality. They've never been in a headset, but almost the same percentage agree that it is a valid test of their ability and that they would recommend it to their peers. So what was interesting to me is seeing I remember one time seeing a technician who had been with us for probably over 25 years performing purging in VR. And when he got to the point where he was going to break down the meter, he got down on one knee, and you could see him holding the wrench, even though that was virtual. You could just see his movements. He was really just falling right back into that muscle memory. It was amazing, really.
That's awesome. I've got another question, Steve, and I'll pose this to you, and then you can toss the ball around to whomever you'd like. But where do you see the future of virtual training, and will it continue when we can meet again? And if so, how do you see it developing?
That's a big, broad question. Anybody on the panel want to handle that? I mean, you've all talked about, potential avenues for your organizations going forward. Is there anything else besides, the VR headsets or what we're currently using that you're seeing that's evolving?
Steve, I'll just say that, I think our folks we're always looking at how can you gain more efficiency and touch more folks out there, especially in the name of refresher training. I mean, we do a really good job of getting training out there for new hires and, the initial training exercise. But we're looking now at, okay, including in the refresher training on more of a consistent basis. And I think the virtual piece could certainly play a part in that.
Yeah, could I add one thing, Steve?
Yeah.
I think one thing we've failed to mention is that, the workforce in our industry is changing, so it's getting younger. And I think the younger workforce is looking for ways to utilize technology. That's their world, right? I mean, we talked about finally getting a smartphone. Well, I mean, can you imagine if you didn't have a smartphone? I mean, in today's world, I mean, I imagine some people don't, but the people that are coming in as new employees, young employees, I mean, they're used to being on that phone and they are used to technology. So I think whatever we can do to utilize technology not only helps fulfill their expectation, but it provides better attraction to our business.
It's a really good insight, Kenny. I appreciate that. And, I might add, I think we've learned over the last year and a half that, not only the younger generations as they move into the industry, but I think we've learned that our older generations have a lot more capabilities to pick these things up than we were giving them credit for, me in particular.
And Steve, one area I think that the industry could change a little bit would be the vendors. Actually, when they bring out new products, have it in VR training, and it can get in the hands of more people quicker. And may be able to provide more information instead of just a pamphlet that, comes out with with a new valve or something. So
that is a good point. Yes. Need more resources for training.
Well, I think that just about is going to be all the time we're going to have. If we weren't able to get to everyone's questions with our scheduled time, we're getting close to it. If we missed any for any reason, or if one occurs to you later on, we want to make sure that we get you the answer that you're looking for. So you can look at on the slide here. We've got a couple of ways that you can reach out to us. Probably the best way is the events@egwusa.com email address. You can send us your questions via that email or that email address, and we get you the answer that you're looking for. You can call our main number or whatever. Again, Steve, Wade, Warren, Keith, everybody that joined us today, thank you guys so much. It was so interesting, and I don't deal a lot with training from where I'm at in the world, but it is very interesting to see the challenges that you guys have had to overcome and what you guys have done to forge a new path. Before I jump off and we go to our closing comments, does anybody have any final comments that they would like to share?
I just want to thank the panelists for being here. Each one of y'all, your experience and your challenges that y'all have shared with us and insights to me, it's invaluable to hear that from this group of folks. So thank you again for being with us.
Hello again, everyone. This session concludes the first ever EGW Utility Solutions Conference. I hope that you enjoyed the presentation as much as we did putting it together. The collaboration and the effort that it takes to pull an event like this off amazed me. And I want to take a minute to publicly thank a few people for their efforts. First of all, I'd like to thank the presenters who presented during all of the sessions this week, and the manufacturers who sponsor the door prizes at the end of every session. I'd also like to thank our staff at EGW who worked tirelessly on this event for the last several months behind the scenes. Specifically, I'd like to thank Daryl Reed, Scott Baber, Mike McGee, and Kelly Lawrence. Job well done. We all have the pleasure and the responsibility to be working in a great industry, the natural gas industry. Over the last several months, our industry shined during a pandemic and through an unprecedented winter weather event like we've never seen before. I'm proud of the way that we performed, and I'm happy that our employees were deemed as essential during these tough times. My pride comes from the fact that the gas never went off, and neither did the income that our employees and their families counted on to feed their families and hold things together at home. I can tell you that at EGW, we feel blessed to be part of the natural gas industry, and we take the responsibility that goes with it very seriously. This is one of the primary reasons that we wanted to put this Utility Solutions Conference together. As a provider of products and services to you, we feel that it is our job to work with you to solve problems, make connections, and to serve you. We consider that to be EGW's core purpose. As I mentioned to you in my opening remarks a few days ago, EGW celebrated our 20-year anniversary on May 15th of this year. What a fun ride it's been for the last 20. Many of those that presented this week and many of you that have viewed these sessions have been with us for the entire time, and we thank you very much for that. Some of you have not been with EGW as long, and that just means that we look forward to celebrating our 20-year anniversary with you sometime in the future. But regardless of our time together, our customers, suppliers, and teammates are the lifeblood of our company and the reason for the success that we've enjoyed during our first 20 years. Thanks to all of you for trusting us, and we look forward to the next 20 years and the opportunities that present themselves for us to work together. So now it's time to reveal the grand prize winner, and that is a $500 gift card going to someone who participated in one of these sessions during the last 3 days. Our producer for this segment, Mike McGee, has drawn the name and is here to announce the lucky winner. Mike?
And that grand prize winner is Gregory Gray with CoServe. So congratulations, Gregory. If you can't hear it, there's applause just thundering in the background. We will get into contact with you this afternoon to get your mailing address so that we can get your gift card out to you. Congrats again. And I would just like to say to Gregory, I am so jealous. But seriously, congratulations, man. That just about does it. Parting is such sweet sorrow, but we have arrived at the end of our very first virtual Utility Solutions Conference. We just want to once again thank all of our contributors for sharing some of their time and expertise for these sessions. It wouldn't have been nearly as good without the partition of some extremely knowledgeable contributors for this. It was just so awesome. So thank you guys very much. And thank you to everyone who took time out of their day to attend these sessions. It wouldn't be the same without you. We sincerely hope that everyone got value out of these from the bottom of my heart and from everybody at EGW. Thank you. And I would like to just make a special thank you to Phil Wiegers and Ford Femel, our owners, and to Jeff Kilpatrick, our CEO here at EGW, for continuing to lead EGW in such an impressive way. It's y'all's leadership that has allowed us to even be in the position to put on an event like this on at all. So thank you guys very much. Well, that just about does it. That concludes our Utility Solutions Conference. You guys have a great rest of your week, and we will see you soon. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you, gentlemen.